Cross Creek by Margret Kinnan Rawlings. I talked morosely with my friend Dessie. I do not think she understood my torment, for she is simple and direct and completely adjusted to all living. She knew only that a friend was in trouble.
Her mother died up in New York of, they said the flu, but the letter that one of the cousins had said it was cancer, and Dessie never would talk very much about it. And so Dessie accompanied the casket all the way from New York to Florida. Okay. And it was the World War I troops on the train that made it possible for her to do this. They really, each time she changed trains, some of the troops from the previous train would get with some of the other troops on the next train and say, please help this little girl to Florida. And that's how she ate. So Dessie accompanied the casket all the way from New York to Florida. And it was the World War I troops on the train that made it possible for her to do this. So she moved in with the Carletons at a very young age. And it seemed that her aunt wanted to be a minister. And she was a hard shell minister. And Dessie was just the opposite. And Dessie wanted to do things her way, and she wanted her to wear a dress and shoes to school, and Dessie wanted to wear a pair of overalls and go play basketball or baseball or whatever. So Dessie one day hurt her ankle really bad in one of her sports, and her aunt came out and said, see, I told you were going to get hurt in those sports, and where's that dress you went to school in? She had overalls on. And she picked up the shoe and threw it at her aunt and ran off. And from there she started living on her own, so she went back up north somehow, and then started building her own log cabin, which still exists, over in Island Grove. That was her dream, to have her. And she said, you're never going to have your own home, you're never going to have anything, you come back when you have your own home, I won't believe it. She says, I will have my own log cabin. And she did, and it's still there. If you told her that you loved her, which I did, she'd say back at you, Dessie, did you ever really find your true love? And she said, you know, I loved every one of them because every one of them was in a different way. She knew everybody that was somebody, especially with Howard, her husband, when she went to New York and Cleveland. And anytime Amy was around, it was Amy. She just loved her. Amy is like a sister to me. Amy was the apple of her eye. He was just, she's a beautiful person. She was just a very outgoing, picture a woman in a timber area, and her running the show in a timber area where they're doing timbers, and in her boots and in her clothes every day and working very hard to get the job done, and the husband laying in the bed sleeping, wanting her to bring him a cup of coffee. That was the end of the world in the last one. So a very domineering, overbearing, loving, caring person that if she gave her word was her bond.
Once I lost touch with the creek. I had had hardships that seemed to me more than one could bear alone. I loved the creek. I loved the grove. I loved the shabby farmhouse. Suddenly, they were nothing. The difficulties were greater than the compensation.
This house was built in, I believe the tax people say 1940.
Okay.
And this wasn't here. When she bought it in 1977, she added her bedroom. She opened it up, made it twice as big. And from here over was the new section all the way around the house, including the back bathroom, closet, and this room right here. In other words, where you see out front the flat roof, that's the part that she added on in 1977. And then the porch with the cypress center pole. The big screen porch with a cypress center pole on the rock. She built the log cabin. She built the place that they had in Old Forge, New York, 4,500 square foot house. The basement had ceilings like this. And she built her cabins at the With of the Coochie River Lodge. She helped do the septic tanks, the plumbing, the building. She put her hat on and her boots on. If there was a group of men talking and a group of women, she'd be with the men. Not to flirt, but to talk, because, well, she didn't want to talk the city slicker language. She wanted to talk with the men about the hunting, the fishing, the outdoors, the market, whatever. My husband was retired, and he couldn't get over some of the things that Dessie would do. And it's the way she dressed. You know, she says, well, why put it on? I've already made it. You know, in other words, why get all dressed up? You know, she'd wear her long sleeve shirt and her khaki pants and her big boots, and that was the way she'd go on a daily basis, wherever we went. And I'll show you her little hat in there she used to wear. So she wore this type of thing to keep from having bugs on her.
We'll take one of those river trips we've talked about. We'll take that 18-foot boat of yours with a couple of outboard motors and put in at the head of the St. Johns River. We'll go down the river for several hundred miles. I agreed, but the creek was torture.
Yeah.
And then this is Dessie's things here from the With of the Coochie River Lodge. This is her fishing things. She'd say, Will, if you throw one more fish in, I'm going to hit you. So he was sitting there fishing, and all of a sudden a huge big bass just jumped in his boat. It's in the Plantation Inn Hall. Didn't even have to catch it. And this was of the With of the Coochie River Lodge in Inglis.
Okay, look.
And here's a Rome when she was there. Oh wait, she said, we want you to navigate the boat up to Alaska.
This is Alaska. Dessie in Alaska.
Yeah, so she did. And Dessie's job was to get the meat for cooking. She told a story one time about walking in the evening through the woods along the water's edge. And she ran upon a cottonmouth, which is a very dangerous snake. That snake had its mouth open, you know, like 12 inches. And she had snake boots on. She always wore snake boots. So when she went to miss the snake, she fell. Well, her gun was on her back, as she called it, had a strap like an army gun, her rifle. And so she looked over at that snake, and it took off, and then popped its head up out of the water and looked at her and says, well, if you don't bother me, I'm not going to bother you, and went on her way. She was definitely a backwoods person. She loved all wildlife. And loved to eat it, too. The way she loved the water to fish, because she fished one end of the With of the Coochie to the other.
The river was a blue smear through the marsh. The marsh was tawny. It sprawled to the 4 points of the compass, flat, interminable, meaningless. I thought, this is fantastic. I am about to deliver myself over to a nightmare. But life was a nightmare. The river was at least of my own choosing.
She did a lot of things. She ran from a lot of game wardens. Had her fishing and hunting camp up in Inglis, the With of the Coochie River Lodge. And of course she had to be rough and tough for that. There was a lot of things that she did over the years that you and I would not do. I imagine there's a lot of truth. It's just so much. It would be such a shame to have this beautiful piece of property just go to waste without sharing the knowledge of all the things that, just the way this house is built alone, it's got to be a great deal of knowledge to someone. And the real feeling that Dessie is here. I would like to be able to pay my taxes, fix this place up, and live here on my own. You know, what would I do if someone put the cash in front of me? You know, nobody's going to come and make us an offer. When we give a price with 2,000 feet of waterfront, they want it for free for right now because of the price of the real estate has gone down such. But the other options that we have, Some people mention the bed and breakfast and keeping the historical value. Some people have mentioned having a campground, maybe just out of 10 acres of it, which the property is CL, and it can be done. I'd like for Forever Florida to become a little bit more interested in the property and check it out because of the history. But to destroy the history of this being an open range cattle ranch at one time, and a fishing camp, and Charlie Dean's home at one time, and then Dessie Smith buying it, who is a legend in her own time of coming up as a pioneer person. She just to see it going to waste is such a tragedy because of the wildlife, the birds. We have every variety of birds that we can imagine, and squirrels and rabbits and deer come to drink, and the dogs let them. And we have one time we had wild turkeys coming right up to us, and we were hand feeding them practically one year, and then they disappeared at Thanksgiving. That last birthday party, you saw how frail she was. That was in August of 2001, and then she died in April of 2002. It's just time for me to go around the bend in the river and see what's on the other side. That's what she said. So, in the last few weeks when we had all the visitors here, and the bed was right where you're sitting, and there was one fella, Archie Island from Inglis, who is an old timer, and he used to turkey hunt with Dessie a lot up there. And I left the door open outside in here, and he had his own rocking chair, and he came and spent hours. He'd be here most of the night sometimes. And his wife Martha called and said, I said, he's here, but I said, you can come in and stay as long as you want. I didn't care. So just so that she could have everybody around her that should be. The Florida Sheriff Hughes Ranch, Mr. Burchard was here, the president, and the ex-president. They each held one hand on the side of the bed. And I was with her 18 years and 4 months. Exactly. She died in my arms. And Amy was here.